next speaker. I knew when we were planning the Second Amendment rally, I absolutely had to at least try to get the Finicum family out here. We've all seen what happened, all right, in Bundy and Oregon and what's going on out in the Midwest. One of the speakers that couldn't make it today was Hal Shurtleff. He and I used to do a thing called the Hal and Dave Show, where we tramped around the 13 original colonies. We literally speaking all over in the Northeast, warning people about Agenda 21. Agenda 2030 now, they've changed the language to protect the guilty. But there's land grabs going on all over. You see it out in their neck of the woods. You see the property owners own thousands of acres, so when they crush a rancher, they take thousands of acres. That includes the water resources, the mineral resources, and if you look closely at what's going on out there, Harry Reid and those other scumbags, they're not out there trying to protect any little crickets and little ferns and whatnot. They're out there for their resources. Darn right, don't you lie to us. Well, the same thing that's happening, you got the B.L.M. out there. We've got a similar thing here. Here it's a different story because they've already squashed many of the farms. You try and find a local supply of food near your home. You're hard pressed. You won't find one in walking distance, most of you. Well, they do it differently. They use land trusts and all kinds of flowery little preservation agencies around here. Regional planning commissions. I mean, folks, what do you have when you've got an unelected bureaucracy, kind of a pyramid-shaped bureaucracy, where these people are out of reach of the voters? You look at your director of the Regional Planning Commission, and you'll never vote him out. He's a permanent fixture there. And they come up with these open space plans and master plans. Where have we heard about master plans before?
Agenda 21.
Oh, and then some. Now here they are telling your community, we know how best you should live your life. You can't get rid of them. But I'm telling you, remember your history, folks. It's not going to be in anything Common Core compliant, I promise you. Is when you have an unelected bureaucracy with an apex council at the top, like the American Planning Association, you have a Soviet system. Do you understand? They call it all kinds of things, but it's a Soviet system. That's what's working. That's what's rooted in your town. What we need to do is what New Hampshire did. They fought back and they're trying to ban regional planning commissions.
Yes.
These little socialist thinkholes need to go. Well, there's 101 ways for these creatures to dupe you out of your land and regulate you out of control. In exchange, you get to pay the taxes on it. Think about your view shed. They want to preserve this mountain. You know, it's a beautiful scenic area. So they wipe out the development rights. They protect it in a preservation, an act of preservation, and they remove the development rights. Real easy to get the people down here around it to say, oh yeah, that's a great idea, fantastic. We can stop that guy from building houses on that mountain so I can look at it. Well, guess what? Up here you've got your protected area, and then you've got your little view shed down here. How many of you have heard of a view tax? Yeah. Well, when they take the development rights up here, the very people that voted their rights out of existence are now paying a view tax. Shooting themselves right in the foot. Oh, but they sugarcoat this stuff and they come into your town halls and they slip them through nice and quick, little meetings, sometimes 2, 3, 4 people. I went to one in Northampton. It was supposed to be a review of a massive new rewrite of the plan for 43 towns. 43. I was one of 5 people that showed up. There were 2 from Northampton and 2 from Amherst.
Wow.
And guess where that one went? You know, they couldn't get people off their dead asses to go in and review the plan that was going to dictate what they could and couldn't do on their property for years to come. So those of you that sat there, you got the government you deserved. I'm not going to sit here and be nice and flowery to all you folks because we got what we deserved in a lot of cases. So if you're not prepared, like I said, to shake hands with the people next to you, go to these tables and be signing up, talking to these folks and networking and getting together something that's actionable. Common Core is not going to leave here and go home and play on Facebook. They're all over town today. These gun right groups, Kirk Wiley, we got to be hooking up with him. Your memberships at this club know when and where the trainings are. Get involved, please. The Finicums, I had to get the Finicums out here. I'm so grateful that they got back to me and accepted my invitation, because their story is one that needs to be told. We've heard the official version, but, you know, you saw the video clips too, didn't you?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, this is what I saw. I saw a vehicle full of people on their way to talk with their sheriff.
Yep.
And then they drove into what can only be described as a kill stop, a military-styled ambush. I watched a man get out of the car with his hands up and get shot in the side. When he reached for his side, they shot him in the back.
That's right.
The feds killed, they murdered a man in cold blood with his hands in the air. An American patriot. What were they doing that was so wrong? They were peaceably assembled. They may have occupied a building, but they were peaceably assembled. It was a building they paid for with their own damn taxes.
That's right.
America was still sitting on their hands. One of your own's been killed, and you haven't done enough yet. I'm telling you, you haven't. When we sit there and watch our neighbor take a hit like that, and we just go, ooh, thank God it wasn't me. They can't take a right from someone else without you losing yours. I promise you that. So when they stack up on your neighbor's door, don't pull your shades. Get your cameras and get out there. Don't let them do that to your neighbors. It is coming back on you. Well, I'm going to... Boy, my blood pressure's going to go through the roof if I keep going here, so I'm just going to finish my introduction here. Both Jeanette Finicum and Thara Tenney, her eldest daughter, are here to talk to us today. I hope you spend some time talking with them over at the table. They're going to have to leave shortly after the presentation, so I highly recommend that you go over to the table. Please, every person here standing on this ground, please tell me, promise me you're going to sign that petition. All right? Please. All right, we've got a book over there that LaVoy wrote, that we get to hear from the man himself. Please consider buying that book. We need to educate ourselves and see what they're doing to our neighbors around this country. So, without further ado, I'd really like to ask you to give a big round of applause for Thara Tenney.
Thank you. We love you.
We love you too.
I'm starting my stopwatch here. I'm going to quote Chris Ann Hall. Good afternoon, liberty-loving people. I always knew that evil powers were at work in every society. Thomas Jefferson himself said, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots." I have read about such secret combinations in the scriptures and in history. My parents taught me they were good. But this evil power has come alive in my life. We can switch the slide. Let's review a few of those people who have watered the tree of liberty. There's Nathan Hale. He was the first American spy. He was caught by the British and hung. The last words to escape his mouth were, "I regret that I have but only one life to give for my country." Then there's the famous Gandhi. He was known for his civil disobedience. At age 76, I think it was, he was assassinated, shot point blank in the chest. I never dreamed that my father's blood would be watering the tree of liberty. almost always happens when the righteous point out the iniquities of their corrupt government. They immediately become the victims of intense persecution, often resulting in death.
Go ahead and shoot me! Jim! Trying to. Stay down, stay down, stay down, stay down, stay down.
We can move that to the next slide. On a less morbid, serious note, I added this slide. It reads, "You do realize that exposing the illegal things your government has been doing is illegal." As comical as it is, it's ridiculous. Next slide. The hours leading up to January 26th, my dad had been in Oregon for 25 days, and me on my side, I had been tirelessly supporting him, trying to push the true story in the media. And at this point, my house was up for sale. I was sitting on the curb in my car as the new homeowners entered, on the phone with my dad, expressing to him my frustrations about some adversarial media that I was lining him up with, and him ending the conversation expressing how much love he had for me and how much joy that I brought him. Now, neither him nor I knew that that would be the last time that we would speak to each other, and just hours later he would be lying face down dead in the snow. It was not until that evening that I was made aware that one of the occupiers had been harmed by the Pete Santilli live stream. He was the only media source there delivering true media. He was a live streamer. He now is incarcerated and has been bouncing back and forth in solitary confinement. Once I was notified through Pete, I notified all 10 of my siblings to his live stream. I then called my trusted media friend. Her name is Sherilyn Eager. She came straight to my house to help me assess the situation. Just within hours of her arrival, she found herself holding me as I fell to the floor, as I was hysteric, for my father had been murdered. For those new to my father's assassination story, it is important to note how his story began years ago as he practiced daily diligence in the things that developed his mind, his body, and his spirit. These such practices enabled him to be the powerful voice that America now knows him to be. Benjamin Franklin said, "Virtue is not secure until its practices have become habitual," and that only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. Every human being has a habit of the heart. It's either for virtue or for vice. And today I'm going to discuss the type of habit of the heart that invites the blessings of heaven, liberty. But before we dive into the meat of that discussion, I want to paint the picture for you of who my father was, because he was a man of virtue and of competence. I want to tell you why he went to Oregon and what they were accomplishing in Oregon. You can switch the slide, sorry. He dreamed to become a cattle rancher ever since he was a young boy. This is his cattle brand, the LV bar. When he was a young boy, age 8 or 9, in school, he would doodle on his notepad, daydreaming about becoming a cattle rancher, and he wanted to develop his brand. He knew his initials needed to be in it, and his child mind understood that every cool cattle rancher has a bar in their brand. So at age 8 or 9, this is the development of his cattle brand, the LV bar. He loved the land, the cool breeze on his face, the smell of sagebrush, the sand under his feet, roaming the land with the animals. He wanted nothing more than to pass this heritage down to his children. And after much sacrifice, hard work, blood, tears, he accomplished his lifelong dream and acquired his own ranch. He always witnessed and testified how things all point to Christ. He told me once, he referred to us as daughter, because having so many, you forget their names. He says, daughter, the cattle live and die, that we might partake and live. He was a historical, political, scriptural connoisseur. Dad did not go anywhere without a book in his hand, and we would often find his nose in the scriptures several times a day. He loved his God. This love is what motivated his use of agency in every element of his life. When in personal counsel with me, he would often say, daughter, it only matters if God is smiling. It was his daily diligence that developed and nurtured his love for God. This love, in essence, became his habit of the heart. I'm going to play a clip for you, of my dad quoting the words of Ezra Taft Benson, who was an American farmer, a government official, a religious leader, who served as the United States Secretary of Agricultural during both the presidential terms of Dwight D. Eisenhower. Ezra's words gave my dad great courage and comfort in his personal stand for liberty.
And I come across some words by a man that I respect a lot by the name of Ezra Taft Benson. And he asked that question. He said, is it morally right to resist tyranny? And then he answers his own question by saying, I believe, or he said, with all the fervor of my soul, I believe that God intended man to be free. And then he went on to say that rebellion against tyranny is a righteous cause. So there you have it. That's exactly how I feel. It's good to read and hear other people that feel the same way. He went on to say that the fight for freedom is God's fight. So when a man stands for freedom, he stands with God. And as long as he stands for freedom, he stands with God. And even if he stands alone, he still stands with God. A man will be eternally vindicated and rewarded for his stand for freedom.
Amen.
Amen.
So the more he studied, the more he began to recognize how tyranny's iron fist was intimately in the lives of the American people. This weighed heavily on his soul because he was a God-fearing man and because he was a principled man. He understood he had a civic duty and responsibility to uphold the rule of law and stand in his respective sphere for the cause of liberty. His sphere to stand for liberty was in ranching. The grass that fed his cattle on his ranch was and is a personal property right. He did not purchase this from the Bureau of Land Management. He purchased this property right from the prior owner. This property right existed long before the Bureau of Land Management's development. Dad asked himself why it was that an unelected bureaucrat had the authority and power to dictate and regulate how he used his personal property right. This issue is not about cows. This issue is not about grass. This is about personal property rights. I'm going to quote my dad. He says, "If you do not have property rights, you do not have freedom, and a society cannot long remain at peace when the right to control and use your personal property rights are infringed upon." At gaining this understanding through his daily diligence, he no longer in good conscience could endorse the Bureau of Land Management as the managers of his ranch, for it never was theirs to manage in the first place. Through his daily diligence, he began to understand how the Bureau of Land Management was actually undermining the principles of liberty found in the Constitution of the United States. He was only able to discern this because of his daily diligence, for he had worked daily to gain knowledge. He decided this is how he was going to make his stand. He understood how important it was for him to honor his personal property rights, for if he did not, they would be lost. In pondering about the firm line that he was about to draw in the sand, he could not help but ponder what was at stake. As mentioned before, he had dreamed, ever since he was a little boy, of becoming a cattle rancher. He wanted nothing more than to pass this heritage down to his children. But despite his wants and his dreams and his passions, he was a principled man. I'm going to play a recording of Dad publicly announcing his cancellation of his contracts and whatever you want to call it, with the Bureau of Land Management.
He fired the B.L.M. as his land manager some time ago. He was on to what was going on, and he fired them. Where do you stand on this in terms of your fees, your compliance with all the mandatory terms and conditions?
Yes. This is where I've had a struggle inside myself. I'm trying to come to grips with trying to be consistent within my own beliefs. Currently, I am current on all my grazing fees. They're unconstitutional, but I am current on them. There is mandatory terms and conditions that we are supposed to sign. I am not in violation of any of my mandatory terms and conditions. And so what I've been struggling with is, how can I say that I believe this and then continue to pay my grazing fees, sign these mandatory terms and conditions, and be consistent in with what I believe? Well, I can't. And so I personally need to be consistent, or I need to just sit down and be quiet. And so I'm announcing that I will no longer continue my relationship with the B.L.M. Again, these are good men. I've had nothing but positive experience with my range cons. I like them. But this is sole and separate from our personal relationship. And so I will no longer pay these fees, nor will I any longer sign these mandatory terms and conditions. Now you're beginning to cross the Rubicon, and now you're beginning to kind of rattle the cage of the big dog. And this can mean everything to me. You know, I can lose everything I have. Clive can lose everything he has.
Well, you saw firsthand the kind of intimidation and projection of force that the government was willing to resort to last year.
Yeah. But if you start making decisions based on what you're going to lose or not lose, or who's going to win or not win, you're no longer standing upon principle.
Thank you. So, the before-mentioned government official, Ezra Taft Benson, warned the people that if we would become like God, knowing good and evil, then we had best find out what is undermining us, how to avoid it, and what we can do about it. Benson prayed, "May it never come to pass that my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge." Much of our citizens suffer from a lack of knowledge in regard to natural rights or property rights, in regard to these land issues in the West. Why might that be? The 21st century has become what I like to call a nomadic suburbanites. We are a transit society moving from one suburb to another. The people have become removed from the land. The commandment that all men shall eat by the sweat of their brow hardly includes the law of the harvest anymore. Most people are not intimately connected to the land and its eternal laws for survival, which all laws point and testify of Christ. Though there is nothing wrong with this modern lifestyle, it is common for people to simply mow their lawns under their HOA policing agency or live in townhomes or apartments, which essentially have no land for them to be bound to. Because of this disconnect from the land, understanding the purpose and importance of personal property is more easily undermined by crafty design by the powers that be to seek to destroy liberty. John Adams stated how property is surely a right of all mankind as real as liberty. Liberty, in essence, binds us to our land. What are the benefits of being tied to the land? What does that have to do with liberty? And why is that something sacred? The benefits. Being tied to the land helps to teach natural lessons that are eternal laws. Procreation, nurture, life and death, the law of the harvest. You reap what you sow. Everything has its season. Accountability. Being tied to the land enables personal liberty because all resources to sustain life comes from the land. The freedom to act, create, and produce on your personal property helps a people to become free and self-sustaining. Doing these things becomes hard, if not impossible, when regulated out of business. Because of the people's disconnect from the land, being connected to the land is no longer sacred. There is even a delusion that liberty is not associated with land or personal property rights. Again, I need to be very clear that there is no problem with this modern day lifestyle. But a lack of understanding of the principles of liberty, that is our problem. We must understand how the powers that be have strategically exploited different lifestyles to bring about their anti-liberties agenda. The very principles of liberty are not fully understood. How can one then begin to translate and discern if proposed bills are for liberty or not liberty, or if those running for election and their trends are liberty or not liberty? We must first have a firm foundation of the basic principles of liberty before anyone is enabled to have success in this translation process. There simply is no other way. Each individual's due diligence cannot be avoided. A mentor of mine boldly stated how much of our societies waste their time with mind-numbing, time-wasting activities. No wonder America has become so dumbed down. I'm going to play a recording of my father explaining in layman terms how the Western lands were settled, and it is important to note how Congress enacted affirmative legislation to acknowledge and confirm the customary property rights established by settlers known as prior appropriation.
Established. And we can look at, let's begin at natural rights. An easy way to try to explain this is how a right is established is using something we're all very familiar with, and that's standing in line. Okay, we've all stood in line. We stand in line at the DMV, we stand in line at McDonald's, we stand in line at a theater. So we all stand in lines, so we know what that is. So when we show up there, and say we're the first one in line, we stand there and we create a right. And we create a right because we were, it was our preemptive right. I am first in line, and the legal term for that is prior appropriation. And so you go and you stand in that line, and you have created a right to be there. And that's called natural law. It's natural, it's self-evidence, as the forefathers would say. We see that, we recognize that. Now the second thing to create that right is you must use it. If you don't use it, you will lose it. And for example, the line gets very long and you say, hey, I want to go outside because I'm tired of standing here. And you come back and you say, hey, I was first in line. And the guy says, well, wait, you left. You lost your right to be, you're no longer preempted. You left, you lost it. Now the third thing you need to create a right, a property right, is you must defend it. So you're standing there, the line is very long, and in comes a bigger person. And he says, I'm not going to stand in the back of this line because I'm big. And so he walks up in front and he pushes you out of the way and he says, I'm in front. Now you have one or two things you can do. You can say, oh, that's not fair, and then retreat and stand back behind him, and in which case you lose your right. Or you can defend your right. And if you defend your right, then you can try to say, no, you must leave. And you may even get other people that say, yeah, that's not right. You got to leave. And you may get other people that believe that you had a right that will support you. But whether they support you or not, unless you defend your right, you lose it. Now, Thomas Jefferson said, we have only those rights we defend. Unless you're willing to defend your rights, you will lose them. And that's what the early patriots did. They were willing to defend their rights. And so that's how rights are created. Now, so how is a grazing right created? Did we get this from the B.L.M? Of course not. B.L.M wasn't around when these rights were created. A rancher, a sheep herder came into the country out here on the strip. It was very open, very empty. And said, well, I see the spring here. I can run 75 head, or I can run 175 head off of this spring. And so I claim this spring as my right. And I'm running cattle on it. So one, he's claimed it. Two, he's using it. Well, in comes another rancher, and he's a little bigger, and says, man, I need that spring, and because I got more cows and stuff. And so he may try to claim that spring as his. The first rancher, if he doesn't defend that, he will lose that. And unfortunately, or however you like to look at it, that's how they were created. We did a lot of shooting of each other and fighting to maintain our rights and draw these lines of grazing rights in the beginning. And now it's pretty well settled. There are fence lines on just about every dividing line between these grazing rights, and we're pretty civil one with another as cowboys, as ranchers, in respecting others' rights, their grazing rights. And so review it again. You must claim it. And that doesn't have to be claimed, that doesn't have to be written in a code of law or anything. That's a natural right. But once you claim it, then the county's responsibility, or the purpose of the county, is you can go there and you can actually record that. That's a step of claiming that right. And so, for example, my rights to graze out there are based upon on water. I have some dirt tanks, I have some springs, I have some trick tanks, and each of these waters can run so many cows. When I purchased this, and not from the B.L.M., I purchased it from somebody else who had created the prior preemptive rights, and I bought it from them, and then I went and I recorded it in Mojave County. And so I claimed my right. And now I'm using that right. Continuous use. It's been continually used from the very first ranchers who created that preemptive right. And it has gone down legally till now I own it, having purchased it from them. Now, the third thing is I must defend it. And that's what Clive Bundy did. He was defending his natural right, his preemptive grazing rights, or prior appropriation. And so that's the issue upon which rights are created. Now, the Constitution, these rights exist separate from the Constitution, but the Constitution does codify.
I just love my dad's voice. He had a true gift to teach complicated, what could be complicated, principles in very layman terms. So the question is, do rights come from government? No, they do not. It is the people that give the government their authority. The Declaration of Independence states, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is derived by the free use of our personal property." The Declaration of Independence is a three-way covenant. First, we acknowledge God as our Creator. We respect Him, and we honor His laws. Second, we covenant with our neighbor to respect each other as equals. We must not persist in the attitude of superiority. There's the old cliche that pride is the root of all evil. And then the third leg of that covenant includes our government. It, deriving its power from the people, too, must honor the individual and their property rights. And they, too, must stop with the superiority attitude. If this three-way covenant is honored by all three parties, much good is brought to pass. The original creation of the Bureau of Land Management was to help establish and determine the value of the land. But over the years, by crafty design, the mandatory terms and conditions have changed to oppress the people and therefore strip them of their rights to control their personal property. Today, the B.L.M. is a real threat to personal property. The Bureau of Land Management undermines the principles found in the rule of law, the Constitution. Who here, by a raise of hands, has picked up the Constitution in the last week and read from it? Let's give all these people a round of applause, please. We need to be reading this sacred document weekly. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Who's read it? Thank you. It clearly states how the government has zero authority to own and manage and mass lands. This dragon is out of its box, and it needs to be put back where it belongs. Now, through my dad's daily diligence, Dad gained an understanding how the proper role of law was to oppose the tendency to plunder, and how all its measures should be in favor of personal property. His understanding of the mission of law enabled him to recognize how the Bureau of Land Management was undermining the principles of liberty found in the Constitution, and how the Bureau of Land Management's policies had converted the law into an instrument of plunder. In regard to property rights, the B.L.M. has created a systemized plundering. Besides its unconstitutional mandatory terms and conditions and fees, the heavy fist of the Bureau of Land Management had not yet reached his ranch in Arizona like it had the Bundys in Nevada, or the Hage family in Nevada, or the Hammond family in Oregon. He was in good standing with the Bureau of Land Management. So the question is, why did he find himself in Oregon then? The first great commandment is to love the Lord thy God with all thy soul. The second great commandment is like unto the first. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. In his journey of daily diligence, discovering true principles of liberty, him honoring himself, to draw that line in the sand to say, this is not okay. These are my rights. He would look and watch for other ranchers on how he could assist them, teach them, and then help them defend their right. When he came across the Hammond story, he was overcome with disgust. He never tolerated bullies. Being a God-fearing, principled man, he could not in good conscience just sit home and do nothing. So on January 2nd, he found himself driving the 20-hour drive to Oregon to participate in a peaceful protest to lay flowers at the doorstep of the Hammond family. It was not until he arrived that it became very clear that he needed to stay long-term.
Following what's happening over in Bend, Oregon with that ranching family over there, the Hammond family, and I'm pretty upset with what the B.L.M. has done to them. Actually, I'm really angry. They had a prescribed burn that was allowed, got off onto 100 acres, burned 100 acres of B.L.M. It's just rangeland, you know, 100 acres. They'll come back just as green next year as ever. They threw him in jail. They fined him a tremendous amount of fines. And now it looks like they're facing 5 more years in prison. These are real lives. These are real people. And by dang, I'm angry about it. America, how long are we going to put up with this type of stuff? You know, it's time to stop. You know, here in this area, B.L.M.'s good to the ranchers here. They don't have a problem here out on the strip. Some good, decent people there. But the question is then, are they doing good? The question is, should they have the power to do good? If they've got the power to do good, they got the power to do bad. If they got the power to help, they have the power to destroy. They shouldn't have the power, period. Because look what they're doing over to that family, the Hammond family. It's outrageous. And I'm pretty dang angry about it. I'd like to use a lot stronger language, but my daughters and my wife will probably watch this, and my mom, and so I'll refrain.
That video was taken before he went to Oregon. He recorded all of his liberty standing movements on his YouTube channel. I invite you to go view it so that you can get to know who he was. If they have the power to do good, they have the power to do bad. And they shouldn't have the power, period. Now, after all due process measures had been exhausted and ignored weeks before the rally, in hopes to assist this Hammond family, my dad and some other courageous men took a stand against a superpower tyrannical government. I'm going to play a clip from a press conference while they were in Oregon. will show you their true motives and reason for being there.
I'm a rancher in northern Arizona. I'm here to support the Hammonds. There's been a lot of words that have been said here. I see some eyes that started to kind of glaze over a little bit. Maybe I can bring it down to a little more emotional level or a human level. Each one of you here today are important. Individually, each one of you are important. Not collectively, we're talking about you as an individual, as a human being. The Hammond family are human beings. They're individuals. They have loved ones. They have children, grandchildren. But this is real. This affects real lives. And so that's why we're here today. And if our federal government would have abided by the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, we would have never gotten here. And so let me just kind of come to a simple level of why this is so bad at the federal level. Our founding fathers had escaped from tyranny. They believed in freedom. And so when they set up our government, they separated the powers, didn't they? And we all know what they are: executive, legislative, and judicial branches. We know those three branches of power. Well, what has happened to 1/3 of our landmass? Do you know the federal government owns and controls 1/3 of this nation? Let me put that in perspective. You need to put in the country of Germany, put in France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, you better throw in Great Britain too. They're getting about the same landmass as what the federal government says that they own and control. And they say they have complete legislative power whatsoever. They've taken it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has upheld it. Yes, they have complete power whatsoever over 1/3 of this nation. Now, let me explain it simply as I can, as I try to stumble over my words here, is that for myself as a rancher, my ranch is northern Arizona, a bureaucrat behind the desk can write a statute regarding me, my ranch. It has a forcible effect of law. This bureaucrat is not accountable to me. We have not elected him then. Now, if I get contrary to that statute, there's a federal ranger with a gun that can enforce that. And if it goes from there, I am brought into a federal court. Neither the law enforcement, the federal ranger, has been elected by us, the people here. They are not under the power of the recall. Neither the bureaucrat that wrote the statute, neither the law enforcement that enforces it, and now I am hauled into a federal court. All three branches of power under one head with no representation. Did we not, as Americans, face this issue some 200 years ago? Don't we remember that phrase? Taxation without representation. So now here we are, control without representation. 1/3 of our landmass. It's an empire within our own country. Unaccountable, unelected. The real power is in the bureaucracies. And so that's kind of the simple part of it. You know, it's about family. It's about my family. It's about the Hammond family. I've spoken to many ranchers in Utah, in Nevada, in Arizona. They are all feeling the same thing. They're all feeling this oppression that is coming down upon them. Their livelihood is threatened, being taken away. Their ranchers are being regulated out of business. And so this is real. These families are real. They're not trying to cause problems. They're food producers. They help make our country self-reliant, free, independent. Do you realize that you have to go back to about 1955 to get as low as the mother head count as we have right now in the United States? Have any of you ate a steak lately? Do you know the price of that? That goes way up. You know, if we had more demand, if we had more production, we would ship out more, we would feed more, we would be self-reliant as a country. These are good people. They produce, they add to our country. They do not take it away. I want to say one more thing about here, what we're doing. Every one of you that says this is an occupation until their demands are met, you misunderstand. We're not making demands. We're not making demands. We're here to work. These buildings here belong to Harney County. These are Harney County public lands, the state of Oregon. This is theirs. This is their land. This is their state. It's theirs. And so we've come here to work. We've not come here to sit as children and stamp our feet and demand that certain things are met. We're going to go to work. We're going to try to help restore these ranchers that have lost their ranches back to them. We're going to legally
go to the records. We're going to search out these ranchers. Over 100 ranchers have lost their ranches here in this very area, in this very county, have been pushed off. We would like to see them return to their ranches, ranch again, log again, live again as free people. And so we're here to try to help that happen. We're going to go to work. We're not going to just sit down here and twiddle our thumbs. We've got a lot to do, and I appreciate you being here. I'm just a simple hick, doing the best I can. And I love this country. I love my kids. I love my wife. I love my family. And if we lose freedom, what shall they do? I want my children to experience real freedom, breathe free. And, thank you.
To Americans the proper way to exercise your First Amendment right to petition a government for a redress of grievances. When dealing with an abusive, powerful system, the options for redress are very limited, and if waiting for permission from your abuser, you are never going to get it. Why was direct action needed, such as occupying the refuge? I'm going to quote Martin Luther King Jr. when he was incarcerated for participating in civil disobedience. He said, "Isn't negotiation a better path? You are quite right in calling for negotiation. Indeed, this is the very purpose for direct action. Non-violent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks so to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. There is a type of constructive, nonviolent, direct action which is necessary for growth." Wouldn't you say this is exactly what my father accomplished? Magically, rural Burns, Oregon ended up on national news. Because much of the 21st century has fallen victim to Ezra Taft Benson's fear in that a lack of knowledge would destroy the people, the mainstream media successfully characterized my dad and these other courageous cowboys, who were the leaders of the Malheur Refuge occupation, as anti-government, gun-flaunting domestic terrorists. My dad and these other cowboys had become the aggressor in the eyes of the public who had not done their due diligence to qualify themselves to successfully be able to discern if these cowboys' civil disobedience was indeed on liberty's side. Those who truly were the aggressors thrived on this lack of knowledge of the public and demonized. This demonization was a powerful tool for the wolves in sheep's clothing. The reality is that these cowboys were fearlessly upholding the rule of law in a competent, God-fearing, virtuous way. Much of America who have been spoon-fed this false narrative were deceived. This form of crafty deception is no new thing to humanity. That brings me to Benjamin Franklin's famous remarks when he said to a missus, after being asked what they accomplished in the Philadelphia Convention, he replied to the lady, "A republic, madam, if we can keep it." What did he mean, if we can keep it? Think for a moment the task the framers were trying to undertake in establishing a free society. If you put the three tasks out there, they are so obvious, they're hardly worth mentioning. Yet the third one, the one that's our duty, is the one that we forget. 1, obviously they had to win freedom, and through much blood and suffering, we accomplished that. 2, this one was harder, but with divine help, they won freedom and ordered freedom, giving it a political structure framework so that it might last. And they did that. The third task, the one that we forget, the one that is our job, is the sustaining of freedom, or in the founder's words, perpetuating the institutions of freedom. The notion of sustaining freedom is one that is hardly discussed by our American leaders today. It has been said by one activist how there has been no serious address on the topic by any American president for the last 50 years. So, how do we sustain freedom? John Adams put it this way: only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. Now, it's important to recognize how freedom is not the permission to do what you want, but it is the power to do what you ought. This power is often referred to as a change of heart in the scriptures. Freedom requires virtue. We can see clearly how this has gone today. When the build-up towards the Clinton impeachment, there was a famous New York Times article that said, "Character does not matter. All that matters in a president today is competence." This is just one tiny example of the widespread dismissal of the key element of freedom. Virtue plus competence equals the perpetuation of freedom. You cannot have one without the other. Are we not admonished to add knowledge to virtue? One historian called it, or likened it unto, the 800-pound gorilla in the room that is so obvious yet hardly mentioned. For the framers, virtue, which in its Latin root means courage, virtue includes everything like honesty, loyalty, patriotism. If you want to do it in modern times, Google's definition of virtue is behavior showing high moral standard. The scriptures call this righteousness. I'm calling it a habit of the heart. My dad's habit of the heart, this ordinary man, was one of virtue and competence. Virtue became his habit of the heart as byproduct of his daily diligence in the things that developed his mind, his body, and his spirit. These practices for him became habitual. Remember, Benjamin Franklin said, "Virtue is not secure until its practices become habitual." While a nation can lay down the structures of liberty, and it might be there for centuries, the spirit of liberty has to be alive from generation to generation. That spirit of liberty is not laid down forever. If a generation arises that does not understand liberty as a habit of the heart, then freedom is in danger of being lost. Might I suggest that there is a corruption of customs? The best constitution in the world, if there is a habitual corruption of customs that is in the bedding in which the Constitution rests, it will eventually become subverted. It will still have the same name, but it will be a different reality. Each generation has to gain a testimony of these eternal principles, understand liberty. If that testimony is not acquired through daily diligence, then a corruption of customs cannot but help be byproduct. We all know the old cliche, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And alas, isn't it true? Taking that admonition to heart, wouldn't it be our duty to the rising generation to waste and wear out our lives in bringing to light all the hidden things of darkness, to hopefully avoid this corruption of customs and their future slavery? Now, here's where I'm going to get a little politically incorrect. First, do you elevate yourself above others? Are you virtuous? Are you humble? Have you made your daily diligence to develop your mind, body, and spirit as your habit of the heart? Next, are you competent in regard to true principles of liberty? Can you discern between anti-liberty and liberty agendas? People who are running for office, legislation, bills, etc. And if you have acquired this competence or wisdom because you cannot give that which you do not have you given much of your energy to the rising generation to help mentor and coach them so that they too might be able to discern? Do we have some repenting to do? I do. I invite you with me to take that courageous look at yourself, because we only have control of our own use of agency. Do the work to improve your situation, and then you will be of greater good. You will have more power to fight this battle for the cause of liberty. We can do hard things. After my father's murder, I was abruptly and horrifically awakened to the awful state that our nation is in. I want you to know that I am evaluating my life. I am petitioning my Maker and doing the work to move forward. It feels out of control, especially when my body's grieving. Despite that, I know that I have a higher power that sustains me. We have been admonished, I love this photo, to be a light unto the world. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all. Might I suggest that this admonition includes a little more than baking bread for a sick friend or teaching Sunday school? Might I suggest that this admonition to let our light shine includes obtaining the word and then actively participating in doing the work to see that no anti-liberty individual gets into a position of authority. Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, in politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. He, being the only U.S. president who had served 4 terms, was in a good position to make such a statement. It is important to remember how there have been Hitlers and Stalins and Caesars and Alexander the Great throughout history. Why should we assume that there is no such men out there today with a perverted lust for power? And if these men happen to be billionaires, is it not possible that they would use men like Hitler as pawns to seize power for themselves? Let's return to the concept of how this nation and its people are under a covenant with God. The Declaration of Independence, it's a 3-way covenant. First, we acknowledge God and we honor and respect Him. We must do this. The progress from righteousness to wickedness of each former civilization, if studied, one would see clearly how a nation such as the United States of America could end up in utter destruction if divine warnings are not heeded. Simply put, we will be destroyed if we do not return to our God.
Amen.
If we do not repent, take that courageous look within ourselves. Become competent, habitual, virtuous people, and warn our neighbor to do the same. This is the key to survival. We must return to the basics. Before we can truly be successful and most effective in this cause, we must have our own life in order. We cannot give that which we do not have. Food for the hungry cannot come from the empty shelf. Money for the broke cannot come from the empty bank. Physical strength cannot come from the weak and frail body. Knowledge cannot come from the unlearned. Spiritual strength and discernment cannot come from the spiritually starved. We must do the hard work to get all of these elements of our life in order. I invite you to do these things. We can do hard things. This is what my father did. This was his legacy. This is what enabled him to be the powerful voice that America now knows him to be. The road to discipleship, which leads to a liberty-deserving people, is hard work, and we can do hard things. After my father's assassination, this hashtag came about. I just love it because this ordinary man, Arizona rancher, this no-namer, can be an inspiration to all of us. He had great power, and so can we if we draw from the right well. I know that I'll see my father again in the flesh, and he will be clothed in the robes of righteousness. For his habit of the heart was one of God-fearing virtue and competence. We are in the business of changing hearts. Everyone has a habit of the heart, either one for virtue or for vice. It is my prayer that my habit of the heart and that your habit of the heart will be one of virtue, humility, moral fortitude, knowledge of correct principles of liberty, repentance, God-fearing, that you might be empowered by your Creator to do His work. I'm going to play this last video. It is a powerful video of my father sharing his sentiments.
It may cost you everything, but that's okay. I want to kind of end a little bit with a story. Christmas morning, Christmas Eve, there was a gentleman that I had great respect for called George Washington. He crossed the Delaware with his soldiers, and he took on the Hessians, the British Hessians, and he lost not one soldier to armed conflict. There was 150 that were wounded, but he did lose two that died before they even got there. 2 men froze to death before they arrived there, and the bloody foot tracks could be traced in the snow. Now, why is my life more valuable than their life? They gave their all, didn't even get the chance to fire their musket. They died frozen. I'm sure they had loved ones, mothers, fathers, probably children, that their dreams were cut off, but they gave their all for this freedom. And why do we reap the fruits and rewards of their sacrifices, and then when it comes down to this time that we don't stand up? Will you be able to hold your head up? Will I be able to hold my head up when we meet together? If I don't stand, I can't. They gave everything, and so many people have given everything. It's time to stand. I want anybody that hears this, please pull your courage to the sticking point. Strengthen resolve, stiffen your back. Let's stand. It may cost you your life. That's okay. Just like I said to that cowboy, we all die. Die for something good. Let your children, your posterity know where you stood, where you stand. Don't disappoint your ancestors. This is the day.
Thank you for hearing what I had to say and for honoring my father and honoring my family. We stand with you, and I'd like to now bring and invite my mother to the stage. Jeanette's going to come. Thank you. Just hearing his voice. Isn't he just cute? I see him in my mind's eye. First, I would like to express my gratitude. Sorry, it was his voice that threw me. I'd like to express my gratitude to all of you for accepting us here, for inviting us, for housing us and feeding us. You've been so gracious and so kind, and we so appreciate the opportunity to be able to come and share this message with you and share my husband with you. And we thank you for your support. Then I have to apologize because we're going to have to buzz because our plane leaves in like an hour and a half. So, leaves by 6, and I guess we have to fly to the airport to get there on time. So I'm just going to say a few words, and not the presentation that I prepared. My husband went to Oregon to support the Hammonds. That was the reason in the beginning. In John, it says to love thy neighbor. And it doesn't matter if your neighbor is in Oregon or if they're on the same block that you live. We are the United States of America, and we're all neighbors. I've heard said to us, why are you here? This is our county, this is our place, this is our problem. We don't want outsiders messing with our problem. But the Constitution was for everyone in this country, in every state, in every county, in every city, every person. And so my husband felt that they were his neighbor and that they needed support and help. And they needed people to stand with them even though they were afraid to stand for themselves. That's why they went ahead and just submitted and went into jail the second time for the same crime. How can we let that happen in this country? I'm very proud of my husband. I miss him terribly. But we know that we will see him again, and I will be with him again through Jesus Christ. I want to read real quickly part of what I prepared. There are journal entries in my husband's journal. Just give you a little glimpse of what was important to him. And I can name them. He was first a man of God, second a loving husband, and third a loving father. And everything else that he did came after those first 3 things. He loved his life, and he loved living each and every day, and that's how he operated with everything. He was a jokester, a trickster, and a great dad who taught his children how to work and play. In 2012, he writes, "This is Easter Sunday. It has been a wonderful weekend. We've rounded up Dad's cows and branded. All of my family and a lot of the extended family were there. It was very rewarding to ride with my dad, my brother Guy, my daughters, Tianne and Catrielle, my nieces and my nephews. My daughters can carry their own weight. They're becoming good riders and have good judgment in working livestock. My heart is filled with joy and gratitude as I watch them run their horses through the brush and the trees, cutting cows. Danielle, Catrielle with her dark hair, and Tianne with her blonde hair flowing behind them. As a father, I am blessed beyond measure. After branding, Jeanette and I rode around the old ranch house, and I pointed out all the old points of the homestead And as we rode around, we watched all the families and the little children doing the Easter egg hunt. Mom and Dad's posterity has grown greatly. The joy and happiness as all of the families interact and work together was wonderful to see. It just shows you that his first priority in life was his family. And we are proud grandparents of 19 and 5 more on the way this year. One day, 4 of my daughters were pregnant at the time of his murder, and there was a little bit of sadness at the thought that he wasn't going to be able to play with them. And then we remembered, hello, he's in heaven playing with them now. So he has the opportunity of preparing them before they come here. They might not remember Grandpa, but he's there. Okay. Journal entry 3 of 2012. As Thara talked about his evolution of his own education. Here it is in 2012. This is the start of a new journal in the year 2012. My name is Robert LaVoy Finicum, and I'm 51 years old. I'm a father of 11 children, and my wife is Jeanette Finicum. The world I grew up in is rapidly changing. I was born in this choice land of the United States of America. This has been a choice land and a noble country. In the more than 230 years of her existence, the country has been a standard of freedom throughout the world. I've lived to see her reach a pinnacle of wealth that has never been known in the history of the world. God raised up noble men who laid the foundations of a free government. The Constitution which they laid down was inspired of heaven for the protection of man's God-given liberties. For almost 100 years, evil and conspiring men have sought to destroy those liberties for their own power and gain. With sweet words of honey laced with poison, they have lied to us. Professing care and concern for the working man and the downtrodden, they have enacted laws that breach the safeguards enacted by our Constitution. The politicians violate their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. That was the beginning of that particular journal. And as he continued to study, you heard through Thara's presentation where he had to make choices for himself as he learned more, and he wanted to be true to his principles. Again, he loved this country. He loved being a father and a husband and a grandpa. He loved the people that he met along the way. In 2013, he wrote a book, Only by Blood and Suffering, Regaining Lost Freedom. And I remember the day that he was arguing with the publisher about the title. She said, oh, they'll never buy that book because it's too harsh of a title. They need to name it just Jake, the main character, Jake's War. And my husband said, no, it has to say that. Nobody. You didn't realize 2 years later that his blood would be some of the blood spilled defending our freedom. The book he wanted to write, that he did write, was conceived in a way because he wanted to be able to teach about freedom, about the lost freedoms, in a story where people would understand and be able to relate to. And so that's why he wrote this book. And I have a comment from a reader here. A major theme of the book is that the people we each are before the collapse will be the people we are the day after the collapse. So spend your time now being the people you want to be. It's about preparing your children, teaching them about faith, hard work, justice, and freedom. LaVoy's personal knowledge of the joy and love within a family is very enviable, leaving you with wanting to spend more time doing what you love and with who you love, inspiring you not to waste any time. I thought that was such a kind remark from the reader, but that is what he was trying to do, was to teach, but also to inspire you to do and to remember what really is important in life. Your family, our liberties, this Constitution that was God-given. We need to stand. You know, it's been difficult for us. We've been kind of just thrust into this. But I'm grateful for the opportunity that I have to grow and learn, because I did not do the study that my husband did. I'm playing catch up. But I'm honored to be able to stand and bear my witness of how important this country is, how important the Constitution is, and how important it is that we stand even though it's hard, scary, difficult, but nonetheless, how we need to stand or we will be without our liberty. I've been reading little books along the way, trying to catch up, like I said. This writer is writing as if it was the founders speaking to us today. It's very interesting hearing them talk to me in the way he has written it. But he asks this question. Each generation, and perhaps especially yours, must answer Mr. Jefferson's question. Can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God? So I ask you to think about that, because I think we need to go back to understanding that God is involved in all things, especially in our Constitution and in this country. And if we remove God and Jesus Christ from all of the things we're involved in on a day-to-day basis from our children being taught, we're going to have an immoral society, one that does not know or understand what liberty really means. And so I pray that we will look back to our roots, have the courage to stand. And as my husband said to me as I was leaving Oregon, he says, Jeanette, take courage, stand, and remember that God is in charge. Again, thank you so much for having us, and I am grateful to have been here, and I love the green. If I could just take all that home to Arizona with me, oh my goodness. It is such a different, but God's country is so vast and so diverse in its beauty, but every place has its beauty, and I'm so grateful to have been here to see this, and thank you again.
You know what, Jeanette, we might be able to accommodate you. We can cancel those flight tickets and keep you right here in Massachusetts with us. All right, you know what? I'm gonna grab my microphone over here. I warned you camera guys that I might go rogue on you. What I want to do is, Jeanette and Thara are heading out of here right away. They got to catch a flight, and after that flight, they got an 11-hour ride ahead of themselves. And I've got some books in my hand that I think each and every one of you should have. All right, so I know some of you have already bought it. I'm going to give Jeanette my Sharpie. I'm going to walk with her down the aisle here, and I want to get rid of these books, and I want you to buy them so they don't have to carry them halfway across the state. They're going to a Father's Day memorial, And this is information I think is critical for you to have. So, I'm going to walk around with her. We got to do this quick, because Chris Pinto's over here ready to kick me in the ass. He wants to speak. So we got to get rid of these books. You need to have them. And I'm going to get a Sharpie out right now so that you can get a signed copy. They are only $20 a piece, and they're going to a good cause. So please, let's all step up right now, dig deep, and let's help this great family do what they got to do here. Here, we got more books over there. We got a couple more loose books. Tara, let's get to, if there's any, there we go. We got some people heading for the table too. We're going to get rid of these right now. And let's lighten the load for the Finicums while they go to this memorial. Right? Okay. We're going to get rid of every last one of them. I'm going to sit up here and be a complete pain in the ass.
Good.
All right, what else we got? We got some other announcements while Chris is getting warmed up here.
Are you going to agree? Our freedoms are waning and we'll lose our liberty, slipping one by one until there's nothing left to see. Are you willing to stand with me? Are you just going to let it be? The ranchers are first, but brother, next it may be me. We all stand together or we'll hang separately. Are you going to the tree? Are you willing to be free? It won't get any easier to regain lost liberty. Strange things are happening in this land that once was free. So brother, I ask you, are you going to stand by me?